from the Government Information Service, I am Alicia Ali. Thank you so very much to all our viewers and our listeners on RSL 97. And as usual, we start our broadcast as they come. You can catch us on www.govt.lc, www.rslonline.com. You can also find us live via Facebook on the official Government of St. Lucia Facebook page, and we are also live on the official Government of St. Lucia YouTube channel. Now, just to recap, we had the throne speech which opened the second session of the 11th Parliament of St. Lucia here on Tuesday, where Governor General Her Excellency Dame Perlette Louisi outlined the government's agenda for the upcoming fiscal year. Following that, the Finance Committee met in the afternoon on Tuesday at 2 p.m. to review the estimates of revenue and expenditure as presented by the Minister for Finance, Prime Minister the Honorable Alan M. Shasney. And on Wednesday, Prime Minister gave his presentation of the budget, the presentation of the estimates. And following that, we had responses from the Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, Honorable Philip Pierre. We also saw contributions from Honorable Moses Jean-Baptiste and Honorable Sean Edward on the opposition side of the who responded along with Honorable Ezekiel Joseph and Honorable Bradley Felix. So today we intend to go through the session once more. And as you can see, the Sergeant at Assembly, the Honorable Leon Theodore John, and this signals the start of our proceedings for today, Thursday, the 27th of April, 2017. Let's go to
decree justice, and from whom alone cometh we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thine heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estate, herein the same, within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the sweet fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all forevermore. Announcements. Just a brief reminder to honorable members that under Standing Order 6410, and I quote, on the debate on the motion that the report of the Standing Finance Committee be adopted, members may raise points as to specific details of heads of expenditure in the report, but may not raise any matters of general principle. Members, please address your debate or your presentation accordingly. Just a reminder. When the House last rose, the question before it was that the Honorable House of Assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the estimates of expenditure for the financial year 2017-2018 in the sum of $1,513,652,200 as a charge against the consolidated fund and other funds in the state of St. Lucia. Honorable Member for Soufrière-Forcé-Jacques, Minister in the Ministry of Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is with distinct honor and humility that I stand in this honorable House to give my unwavering support to this motion of the 2017-2018 estimates of revenue and expenditure, and to make my maiden contribution to this budget on behalf of the proud people of Soufrière-Forcé-Jacques. Before I do so, Madam Speaker, permit me to thank the Almighty God for His outpour of blessings. Madam Speaker, I would like to express my sincere thanks for the trust and confidence which they have placed in me as their partner. Madam Speaker, I want to assure them Madam Speaker, Soufrière had become through mediocre representation of false doctorates and most recently comical parodies. Madam Speaker, my presentation will be twofold. First, I will speak to the program and policies within my ministry under the Departments of Housing and Urban Renewal and Transport. And secondly, I will give an indication of the benefits that the 2017-2018 estimates will bring to my constituency of Soufrière-Forcé-Jacques. But Madam Speaker, permit me to say a few words on the economy of this country. Through you, Madam Speaker, permit me to respond to the member for Castries East and the leader of the opposition, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I listened carefully to the bravado coming from the member of Castries East yesterday afternoon regarding the state in which the Labour Party left the economy in 2016 when we assumed governance of the country. Madam Speaker, he proclaimed a rosy, juicy picture of the economy to this honorable House in his deliberations. My question to him, Madam Speaker, is very simple. If the economy was so juicy and rosy, if everything was so perfect, if this country was managed with fiscal prudence, why is that he and his colleagues are seated on the opposite side of this honorable House today, Madam Speaker? Why are you all seated on this opposite side of the House? Because, Madam Speaker, when an electorate goes to the polls, the number one factor that determines the outcome of the election is the economy. Is the economy, Madam Speaker. And if the economy was performing, if there was buoyancy in the economy in St. Lucia in 2016, the leader of the opposition and the members on the opposite side wouldn't be sitting where they're sitting there today, Madam Speaker. They wouldn't be sitting there, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, If I was in the position of the honorable member, I would have resigned as parliamentary representative of Castries East and political leader of the Labour Party after making such statements in this honorable house yesterday, Madam Speaker. As the second in command, Madam Speaker, and I believe you're still the second in command, you knew the economy was doing so well, and yet still you couldn't convince the people that your team was the best for the job. Madam Speaker, in my mind, the member admitted failure on the part of managing this economy. And anytime he comes to this honorable house and proclaims such a juicy picture of the economy, Madam Speaker, this opposition seems to be in conflict with the state that they left the economy in 2016. Madam Speaker, I said this because here you had the leader of the opposition and member for Castries East proclaiming such a healthy economy. And hours later, Madam Speaker, my good friend, the member for Dennery North, giving us a bleak report on the economy they were managing up to 2016. You remember? You spoke about Barbados, Trinidad, all the civic groups you all met. But prior to your speech, everything was buoyant in the economy. So, Madam Speaker, you have the leader of the opposition saying something. You have the second deputy saying something else. A den of contradiction, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me tell the members of the opposite side what we inherited on June 6, 2016, when we assumed governance of this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what we found was an ailing economy which had experienced 3 years of negative growth under the St. Lucia with fundamentally flawed policies and economic rhetoric, Madam Speaker, unable to deliver, leaving the people in contraction and pain. Madam Speaker, a country with crumbling infrastructure, underfunded education and schools, a health system in total collapse, a demoralized police force, Madam Speaker, over 24% unemployment and almost 50% unemployment amongst the youth. The oppressive tax of VAT, as proclaimed by the former Prime Minister, and almost $1 billion in debt in less than 5 years, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, these are some of the maladies that this government inherited when we came into office. And I know the leader of the opposition would not sit to listen to me this morning, but he knows I am speaking the facts. Speaking the facts here. Madam Speaker, because of these ailments, the people of this country gave the United Workers' Party and this Prime Minister the mandate to resuscitate this economy and set a foundation to build a new St. Lucia. Madam Speaker, a strong and new St. Lucia, which will bring back economic sustainability and prosperity to Fair Helen. Housing, Madam Speaker. Housing program on page 491, head 4802, an amount of $25,544,397, an increase of over 100% from last year's allocation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the leading items there are item 222, Proud Settlement Upgrade, an allocation of $13,753,972. Item 223, Proud, Phase 3, $3,093,825. Madam Speaker, we have increased the allocations of both line items this fiscal year in order to expedite the process of unplanned settlements on the island. I hope this, Madam Speaker, will appease to the members of Castries East, Viewfort North and Dennery North, who alluded to the Proud project in their deliberations yesterday afternoon and evening. Also on the housing, Madam Speaker, item number 225, National Sites and Services Program, an allocation of $4.2 million, and item 227, Housing Construction Program, an allocation of $3.5 million. Madam Speaker, this allocation gives you an indication of how committed we are to providing adequate housing to the people of this country. Madam Speaker, I personally believe there cannot be economic development if your people cannot afford quality housing in your country. Your people must be able to afford quality housing, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I refer you to page 292 of the estimates. You could see clearly, Madam Speaker, that not a single dollar was allocated for housing construction for the past 3 financial years. Not $1, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Department of Housing Urban Renewal is mandated to ensure the efficient delivery of affordable housing options and effective framework for the sustainable development of urban settlements in St. Lucia. In so doing, Madam Speaker, the agency will focus on developing and implementing affordable and sustainable housing and related service delivery system capable of assisting in the alleviation and ultimate eradication, Madam Speaker, of poverty among selected communities and households and the sustainable renewal of urban centers. Madam Speaker, the broad strategic priorities of the Housing and Urban Renewal Program are outlined as follows: to improve access to affordable housing targeted at low to middle income segments of the housing market, to improve access to adequate housing for the more vulnerable market segments, including, Madam Speaker, the destitute and households which have been impacted by natural disasters, to improve the investment climate within the housing market in order to stimulate greater private sector participation, because with the fiscal position of the country, Madam Speaker, government cannot go alone. We need to involve the private sector, particularly, Madam Speaker, within the middle to low income segment of the market, thereby targeting 60% of the labor force. Although, Madam Speaker, the plan is for the entire nation, special consideration will go out to the young people of this country. For those who could afford more luxurious homes, Madam Speaker, a related option will be made available. Madam Speaker, I believe it is imperative that every young person in this country should eventually own a piece of this island, either through the purchase of a home or a lot. And this is the mission of this government, the men and women on this honorable side of the House, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the plan is to provide 2,000 houses, in addition to approximately 3,500 house lots over the next 4 years. And Madam Speaker, we can get to that target. In that regard, Madam Speaker, we plan to engage investors in public-private partnerships as part of the said objective. All these good things under the former administration. Moshi, Talvan, and Badouange. But, Madam Speaker, I shall elaborate more on these failed developments in my policy debate. Because you see, Madam Speaker, you cannot use all your ammunition in the first battle, the first round of the battle. You have to leave ammunition for the second round. They left the Lone Ranger. Transport, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the transport on page 504 of the estimates, head 5606, item 201, new licensing and registration database. Madam Speaker, there is a provision for a new licensing and registration database in the amount of $1 million. Again, Madam Speaker, I refer you to page 411. Not a single dollar allocated to the capital expenditure for this item for the last 3 years. Not a single dollar was allocated to transport for capital projects. Please permit me, Madam Speaker, to speak to this important project for all the good reasons under the sun this morning. This project, Madam Speaker, is aimed at resolving a long-standing problem which the members on the opposite side failed to address. And may I point out, Madam Speaker, that the leader of the opposition and the member for Castries East was the then minister responsible for transport. We would recall, Madam Speaker, the many news clippings where persons seeking driver's licenses, as well as the driving instructors, complain about the bottleneck in the related system. We on this governing side will fix the problem, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the goal of this project is to improve the efficiency, security, and accuracy of registration of all motor vehicle drivers in St. Lucia. Madam Speaker, the St. Lucia's driver's license is classified as a travel identity document, and as such must meet international standards. The current process of acquiring a driver's license is time-consuming and prone to human error. The new system proposes to automate the process of acquiring a learner's permit by capturing the learner's biodata electronically from the onset, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this new system will also facilitate electronic driver fee retesting. Presently, fee retests are conducted twice a week with 2 sittings on Tuesdays and 1 oral sitting on Fridays in both Castries and Vieux Fort, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the proposed new system will facilitate multiple sittings every day from Monday to Friday in both Castries and Vieux Fort. Will be able to immediately pay for and electronically book the next available sitting. These increased opportunities, Madam Speaker, for bookings will significantly improve revenue collection by the government. Madam Speaker, the automation of the processes will require improved controls in data entry and printing of driver's licenses. The automation of this process, Madam Speaker, means that much of the verification of information submitted is done at the application stage and will expedite the production of a driver's license and eliminate the delays in printing of renewals. So in other words, Madam Speaker, we are going to come out with an app, a software, where you could stay in the comfort of your office, your home, in your vehicle, vacation, anywhere, and renew your license. And your license gets mailed to your mailbox. Instead of queuing at Union, in Vieux Fort, wasting half a day, hours, this is the way that we are heading, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the document itself will also contain a number of improved security features, including machine readability, which is required of all travel documents. This is especially significant, Madam Speaker, as an increasing number of nationals are traveling for leisure or employment overseas, resulting in an increase in the number of requests for authentication of driver's license. These security features will also reduce opportunities for identity theft. Madam Speaker, the foregoing will involve an assessment of the current processes, procedures, and legal requirements of the Transport Department. And networking solutions. Electronic access will be made available to a number of such as verification of identity and the law enforcement agencies for real-time or instant information verification. So this system, Madam Speaker, will be linked not only with the banks but with the police, customs, and so on. So if the police stop you on the way, they have this app, they can just go into this app, enter your information, and get to know everything about this driver, including his the expiration of his driver's license, vehicle registration, insurance, tickets, and everything, Madam Speaker. In summary on this specific issue, Madam Speaker, we will reduce the process time to a bare minimum, provide the required security and safety features, in addition to the revenue benefits on implementation of the new system. Madam Speaker, this will improve efficiency in the system, resulting in more persons completing the process in a shorter period of time, which comes with the normal fee. And that, Madam Speaker, is additional revenue for the government. Madam Speaker, this is an outline of some of the policies and programs within those two departments of my ministry as listed in the estimates. Madam Speaker, as I review the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2017-2018 financial year, it delights me to see the many allocations under the various heads which will tremendously benefit my constituency. The Minister of Finance have allocated $1,062,461 for the continuation of the Hummingbird Beach project. Madam Speaker, I am very pleased and thankful to the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and the Minister of Equity for this allocation. Madam Speaker, this allocation will go a very long way in seeing this project come to fruition after 5 years. Madam Speaker, the estimated cost of this project is EC $2,853,152.25. Madam Speaker, we can see with this allocation of the estimate, there will be a shortfall of almost $1.8 million. Madam Speaker, this is a project which is designed to provide sustainable jobs and economic development for the people of Soufrière. This project, Madam Speaker, will promote entrepreneurship for the young water taxi operators at Barons Drive, tour guides, vendors, diving and water sports operators, and a number of other individuals in the community. Madam Speaker, this project was initiated by a UWP administration in 2011 because we had the foresight to see, Madam Speaker, the benefits it would generate for the people of Soufrière. But because the former parliamentary representative, Madam Speaker, did not conceptualize this project, not one additional block or steel was laid to complete the project for the people. But Madam Speaker, we on this side of the House Madam Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, there is a shortfall in the amount to complete the project. And as I remember, the Soufrière Foundation had pledged funding for the project in 2011. But how much they can contribute towards it. Due to the financial mess, the new by 2016 at the foundation. And I'm talking about, Madam Speaker, and listen carefully, Madam Speaker, I'm talking about a loss in Creole jazz of $850,000 in 2014. And a loss, Madam Speaker, of $600,000 in Creole jazz again in 2016. Total, do the mathematics, Madam Speaker, $1.45 million down the drain in Creole jazz. That is right. That's why they voted me in. Madam Speaker, imagine what $1.45 million could have done for the people of Soufrière. But it went down the drain in Creole jazz. Madam Speaker, in my policy debate, I shall deliver and deal more with the Soufrière Foundation and what we inherited there in 2016. Madam Speaker, on the same page, 493, line item 287, BNTF program. Madam Speaker, I have developed a socio-economic development plan for Soufrière. One of the components of this development plan is the Old Trafford playing field. Madam Speaker, BNTF implementer SSDF presented me with a proposal with only a concrete slab on part of the field just to park buses, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, imagine prime real estate on the waterfront in Soufrière. And the vision of the members on the opposite side was just to slab it to park buses. I halted it, Madam Speaker. And I told them, this is not the vision of the United Workers' Party. This is not my vision for the people of Soufrière. Old Trafford shall become an economic hub for the people of Soufrière. And Madam Speaker, the plan for Old Trafford is to erect a farmers market to shelter the vendors, the farmers from the elements, with comfort station, beautifully designed, again in keeping with the heritage of Soufrière. Restaurants, Madam Speaker, a craft market, duty-free shopping, and I want Old Trafford to be a mini Point Seraphine, Madam Speaker. Okay? Because, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, the people of Soufrière have been crying and asking for a cruise ship to come to Soufrière. I remember 25 years ago, Madam Speaker, we had ships like Ocean Islander, Americanis. It used to anchor right in front of the police station, big ships. And the people were very happy. The people made a good living from the cruise ships. So, Madam Speaker, I have been in discussion with my colleague, Minister of Tourism and Member for Ancillary Canneries, and I'm certainly sure, with assistance from the Minister for Infrastructure and Ports and the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, we can make this a reality in this term of office, Madam Speaker. A cruise ship for the people of Soufrière at least once a week, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I'm very delighted to see that the Minister of Finance made an allocation of $1,614,554 to this program. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I'm hoping to get some resources out of this allocation towards the project of Old Trafford. Madam Speaker, on the same page, item 288, which speaks of the NCA Colobet vending facility. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the former administration. I believe it's a wonderful project. It is right at the top of Laho when you enter in Soufrière, with a beautiful view of Sulphur City. It's going to be very comfortable for the vendors, the tourists who stop there on a daily basis. So I want to commend them for initiating this project. However, as the member for Grosdile alluded to yesterday, last evening in his presentation, it is incomplete, Madam Speaker. We have to do some additional works on the roof, the comfort station, the retaining walls, trimming of the trees, landscaping, and so on. So I am very happy that there's an allocation of $300,000 for the Colobet vending facility, Madam Speaker. We continue, Madam Speaker, to page 506, head 5702, item 201, Soufrière Town Square, where there is an allocation of $921,987, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this project was conceived by the former administration without any clear vision and foresight of the French heritage and historical background of the town. Madam Speaker, the design had many flaws, amongst them lack of proper traffic planning and, when completed, high maintenance costs. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the project had to be reviewed and redesigned. Madam Speaker, it is interesting to note that $2.3 million was allocated to this project under the previous administration, and $1.3 million was expended, and the project is not 40% completed, Madam Speaker. And they, on this other side of the House, keep on talking about prudent management. Where is the prudent management? $2.3 million. Project is not 40% completed, but you all have spent $1.3 million. So, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister of Finance for making this allocation available for the completion of the Soufrière Square. We are hoping to begin construction in the first quarter, and hopefully by September into October, the square shall be completed, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, grand opening. Madam Speaker, I make reference to page 478, head 4306, item 233, construction and rehabilitation of roads. This allocation, Madam Speaker, I welcome, as the roads in Soufrière have been neglected and are at a state of disrepair. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I look forward to the Honorable Minister responsible for infrastructure to give attention to the rehabilitation of the following roads. Madam Speaker, I'm referring to roads like the Fosse-Jacques through Mini and Belplaine Road, Zeno, Fontbernier, New Development, and the many other secondary roads and reconstructed. And Madam Speaker, in my policy debate, I shall speak a little more about Esperance, the road, and some other developments in this area, which is going to be forthcoming. Madam Speaker, the Esperance Road is a priority, especially in response to disasters in Fosse Jacques. There is only basically one way out of Fosse Jacques right now, going down to Soufrière, and the river is already undermining the road. So we need to pay some urgent attention to the Esperance Diamond Road as another way out or into Fosse Jacques in the event. Madam Speaker, same page, item 256, desilting of river and drains. Madam Speaker, we will soon be entering the hurricane season, and we know the vulnerability of Soufrière to flooding and landslides. I look forward to Soufrière getting its fair share, Madam Speaker, of this allocation towards the desilting of the Soufrière River to alleviate the fears of the residents of Wingsville and the Soufrière Hospital. Also, Madam Speaker, for the first time in 5 years, I'm hoping that we can desilt the Fosse Jacques River from the Bailey Bridge down towards Belvedere. And this is an area, Madam Speaker, I remember clearly in the members on the opposite side, the former parliament, Thomas, nothing has been done in Fosse Jacques, nothing to clear the area, no desilting. Madam Speaker, he came into office, he was a minister of government, 4.5 years, no desilting of the Soufrière, of the Fosse Jacques River. But I'm certainly sure, Madam Speaker, with the assistance of the Minister of Infrastructure and the support of my colleagues on this side of the House, the Fosse Jacques River shall be desilted this year, Madam Speaker. In continuing under the same heading, Madam Speaker, item 283, West Coast Road Rehabilitation. Madam Speaker, this West Coast contributes significantly to the economic development of this country, particularly to the tourism sector. Many people commute this road daily, Madam Speaker. People as far as from Choiseul, the Soufrière, Canneries, Ancillary, commute this daily, as well as the tourists. Shamefully, Madam Speaker, I refer you to page 206, item 283. You will see for the past 3 years, Madam Speaker, not a single dollar was allocated for rehabilitation of this important road, the West Coast Road. And I'm very happy that the honorable member for Castries East, who was the former Minister of Infrastructure, has returned to his seat to head that. 3 years, not a single dollar was allocated to the West Coast Road. And they claim they love Soufrière. They claim they love ancillary canneries. They claim they're there for the economy. Again, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister of Finance for his understanding of the importance of maintaining this road. You have nothing to say. Madam Speaker, through you, I would like to say thank you to the Minister of Infrastructure for the potholing works. Madam Speaker, which was done a few weeks ago from Katshime to Belvedere. I want to thank him for that, Madam Speaker, because I'm certainly sure, Madam Speaker, it cost the Ministry of Infrastructure more than $5 to block those holes. Also, Madam Speaker, on page 479, item 285, road safety. I seek the indulgence of the Honorable Minister to give consideration, Madam Speaker, in erecting metal guardrails along hazardous points on this road. Madam Speaker, there are some very dangerous areas on the West Coast Road, and with this allocation, I would think that the Minister of Infrastructure would procure and erect some metal guardrails there. I don't know, Madam Speaker, if you could remember about 10 years ago, this area and many other places on this road. So I believe, Madam Speaker, that this is a priority in road safety on the West Coast Road, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, still on page 479, head 4308, item 204, repairs and rehabilitation of schools. Madam Speaker, I cannot exclude any school in my constituency of Soufrière which does not require major repairs and rehabilitation works to be done. Not one school, Madam Speaker, can be excluded. Madam Speaker, It baffles me that the former district rep, who was at one time a principal, could have allowed the deterioration of schools in Soufrière to get to such a deplorable condition. It baffles me. It baffles me. Latin l'argent bien. Madam Speaker, is that a government that cares and loves the children who are supposed to be the future of tomorrow? Paying no attention to schools? No attention? Madam Speaker, school infrastructure must be in a suitable condition which is conducive to learning. And therefore, it is very welcoming to see this allocation made towards school rehabilitation, and I shall call upon the Honorable Minister for Infrastructure to support the schools in Soufrière. And of course, I'm certainly sure that my colleague friend in Choiseul will do the same, and all other colleague ministers will be knocking on his doors for that support, Madam Speaker. And here he comes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the health of a nation is of paramount importance. Paramount importance, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I refer you to page 497, head 5315, item 215, electrical works at Soufrière Hospital. Madam Speaker, what obtains at the Soufrière Hospital is unacceptable. We need to upgrade this facility, Madam Speaker, to provide quality healthcare services to residents and visitors of Soufrière. And Madam Speaker, I shall speak more about the state of the health sector in Soufrière at policy debate level, but I welcome this allocation for the electrical works. Madam Speaker, there is an allocation on page 487, head 4602, line 218, village tourism. Madam Speaker, as of tourism and is home to the most beautiful and unique attractions on the island. It is also, Madam Speaker, Soufrière, Madam Speaker, is also the home of the most loving, welcoming, and charming people. And therefore, Madam Speaker, this allocation will help bring positive economic returns to the constituency. I see my good friend, Madam Speaker, Honorable Member for Denry North is smiling. Okay, he knows that. Soufrière people are loving and charming. Denry North. This will contribute, Madam Speaker, to the enhancement of the tourism product, which will in turn lead to increased revenue and job creation. He's in Soufrière very often. Moving on to agriculture, Madam Speaker. Page 474, head 4112, line 256, rehabilitation of farms post-Hurricane Matthew. This allocation, I know, Madam Speaker, will make my farmers of Font-Saint-Jacques extremely happy. As we can recall, Madam Speaker, Font-Saint-Jacques was hard hit from Tropical Storm Matthew, which impacted heavily on the output of the farmers. I look forward to bringing them some form of relief, Madam Speaker, from this allocation. Madam Speaker, I will deliberate more on agriculture in my policy debate. Madam Speaker, 499, head 5403, line 207, lighting of recreational facilities. Madam Speaker, the youth must never be forgotten, and we all know that sports is a critical component of their development, and therefore, Madam Speaker, I look forward to receiving assistance from this allocation towards the replacement of quality lights on the multipurpose courts at the Soufrière Mini Stadium and the placement of lights on the playing field at Font-Saint-Jacques. Madam Speaker, I draw your attention to page 504, head 5602, line 204. It pleases me, Madam Speaker, to see that the Minister of Finance has allocated $19,155,976 towards Constituency Development Program. Madam Speaker, I am thankful that this allocation is available, as I am certain it will bring about major socio-economic benefits to my people of Soufrière. My share of this allocation, Madam Speaker, will go a long way in executing many of the small projects which are so needed in the various communities around the constituency. And Madam Speaker, I shall not dwell on the CDP, Constituency Development Program. I will leave this to my colleague minister and the member for Kashmir Southeast when he makes his presentation to the Honorable House. Madam Speaker, it may sound like I have asked for a lot from my people of Soufrière, of the neglect and the abandonment of the people of Soufrière at the hands of the Labour Party, of the people of Soufrière. Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Finance for putting together these estimates of revenue and expenditure. Thanks. Madam Speaker, the fiscal position this budget cycle, Madam Speaker, will lead us to a path of economic recovery and stability. Madam Speaker, I thank you and honorable members for your indulgence. And once again, I want to express my support to the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 2017-2018. I thank you, Madam Speaker. Right.
Honorable Member for Castries South.
Yes, please. Shadow for tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to start by joining the colleagues who came before me and express appreciation and thanks to the Almighty for giving you the strength and the focus and the belief to have been elected and join this honorable house, and to thank my own family and friends for all the support that they gave. It's in times like these you really know who your friends are, and you know who are the persons who pretend and persons who say things because they don't know you and judge you. And Madam Speaker, like those before me that have been elected and lost and re-elected, campaigns are really a learning experience. It tests your character. So I'm pleased, Madam Speaker, to address this debate representative for Castries South. I am pleased, Madam Speaker, because I am a product of Castries South. I was born there and I was raised there. It nurtured me to become the person that I am today. I have no shame in saying I was born and raised by the bridge, and I am of and from Castries South. Madam Speaker, please give me the latitude to say a few things before I directly address myself to the estimates, because I notice, Madam Speaker, that you've been a very tolerant presiding officer. And despite our own exchanges, Madam Speaker, I have tremendous respect for the chair. Madam Speaker, I am immensely grateful for the support given to me from the constituents of Castries South and the continued support since the general elections. It was a general elections characterized by the most vicious character assassination and smear tactics. But, Madam Speaker, while some may rejoice in this approach to our politics, there is a majority, sometimes silent sometimes overlooked, that detest such politics. Our youth want a different politics. They want a politics of hope, of aspirations, of decency, and of decorum. Madam Speaker, I had a team that insisted that we would have a political campaign that was different, one never seen before in the political life of St. Lucia. I trust that I lived up to the expectations of my team and the youth of St. Lucia. But the Madam Speaker, elections is done. The people have spoken. I did not come in with a track record of performance as a rep. I had to present myself as I am. Someone who started in the student movement, in the youth movement, who went to university, who always tried to do well. And whenever I was given a task, to do it with excellence. But Madam Speaker, I will, Madam Speaker, stand here and say to you that as the parliamentary representative for Castries South, I have to represent all, be it SLP, UWP, or no P. I have to represent everyone. It is not an easy task in the present political setting with communities more tribalized, more politicized, and more faithful than ever. I have a simple request for all the constituents of Castries South, that we should not allow the culture of division and intimidation which has been engendered in our country to destroy our dreams of a better community. Instead, we should muster our collective efforts in pursuit of a constituency characterized by harmony and community empowerment for its development. I promise, as I did during the campaign, I will serve all, regardless of which party a person supports. I am not a person of political tribalism, and I will never be. Madam Speaker, ask anyone who's worked with me, Department of Youth and Sports, West Indies Cricket, Cricket World Cup, World T20, whether I have ever practiced political tribalism. The Honorable Manager and we run Cricket World Cup together, and she can tell you all the discussions we had about politics, and ask her who was my right hand. Her politics did not matter then. And I've been chastised many times because some of my close friends are members. But that does not matter the best interest of this country. I care about performance. I care about people working as expected. And then politics and the party affiliation comes second. And in the same way, my constituency office is open for any and every constituent to walk in and to see me. No one will ever be turned away. So I promise my team in the campaign, and I promise my constituents, that I will never boast and beat my chest of how I defeated an opponent. I will not treat political opponents as enemies or call people nasty names and try to destroy their reputations. Because like my colleague said last night, that's not me, and that's not my politics. But Madam Speaker, I will always confidently and purposefully represent my constituency. I will strive with all the ability I have to hold the government to account, not through insinuations, but through thorough examination of the facts and asking them the hard questions. That's how it should be done. All my life, I have known to do it one way, and that is through hard work and perseverance. That when given a job to be done, you do it well. I have carried that with me through the University of the West Indies, Cambridge University, London School of Economics, McKinsey, ICC, WICB, and the High Commission in London. And Madam Speaker, I will not allow the honorable member to distract me for a simple reason. It is because I believe he suffers from a persistent ideological backwardness, Madam Speaker. I will answer him, Madam Speaker, when he can go out in public and say all the things Richard Frederick said about him is untrue, and go on Richard's program, sue Richard, and defend himself. Until he can do that, I have nothing to say to the honorable member, because I am focused on doing what has to be done. And Madam Speaker, I know, Madam Speaker, I'm a marked man in many respects. I know that. I am a marked man. But I hold no fear. You see, Madam Speaker, I was forged on the anvil of struggle and survival, so I know persecution. I was molded in the fire of resistance of the youth and student movement, so I know victimization. I will not be broken by threats, email and phone hacks of vindictiveness. I was not broken as a young man growing up on the bridge, not far from here, and I will not be broken now. I know persecution, Madam Speaker. I have faced it from the UWP. I recall the days as a leader in the youth movement, the NYC, year after year applying for a scholarship to go to university, coming out number 1 on the interview list, and never getting a scholarship. Never. And I promised myself then, and I do now, I will never be part of doing that to any young person in St. Lucia, regardless of the political party they support. Madam Speaker, we wonder about the treatment of the National Trust. The National Youth Council was banned because it criticized the government of the day. There is something in the DNA of some people in the United Workers' Party that believe if you do not succumb to them, they must destroy you. Madam Speaker, if you ever watched Star Trek, you probably would have heard and noticed what they call the bog. Assimilate or annihilate. If you cannot give in and become a bog, you must be destroyed. That is in the DNA of some, not all. Madam Speaker, I'll be very quick to tell you, I will never accuse every honorable member on the other side. Some of them, I've known them many years. And I'll tell you, Madam Speaker, the person I've known the longest in this honorable house is the former Prime Minister and Minister of Infrastructure. We actually formed a youth club together way back in the 80s. I was 16 then, he was about already 30 years old. But Madam Speaker, there are other members of this House I've known for many years that have never spoken an unkind word to me, and I don't think they will speak an unkind word. But there are some deep in them, they believe it is okay to be nasty. They believe it is okay to treat people badly. But Madam Speaker, that's their style. That's their style. It's not my style. And I will always believe, Madam Speaker, in being strong and resolute. So, Madam Speaker, as I address this Honorable House on the estimates of expenditure and revenue for financial year 2017-2018, I wish to focus on 4 questions. Are there any benefits to Castries South? Does the figures truly reduce taxes and deliver on the election promises of the ruling party? Is it a deficit budget, and does it pass the test for fiscal responsibility? And fourthly, is there any borrowing in those figures? Now, Madam Speaker, yesterday, my dear friend and the member for Procedural Saltibus started to say something about FICA's plans, and he spoke about caca, I think it was. Madam Speaker, for a while, I almost got a Batman chair, a heart attack, but I thought the honorable members calling the budget a caca budget. But he wasn't. But I thought so, because describing it as a caca budget probably says a lot of what it is. But Madam Speaker, let us proceed. On the surface, Madam Speaker, there is little in the estimates for Castries South. I searched every page for a mention of a community in Castries South. There was one, Madam Speaker, on page 479. The capital expenditure of the Department of Infrastructure states a sum of $655,446 for resurfacing of the Cicero Main Road, a project which was completed in early 2016 and for which a payment must be made. Madam Speaker, I looked, and I'm very glad the Honorable Minister is walking in at this precise moment. I looked for any allocation for the rehabilitation of a side road in Goodlands, a road which was started by the previous parliamentary rep under the CDP, and he stopped right at the residence of a former candidate and former Attorney General, Rudolph Doddy Francis. But beyond there, the road is absolutely terrible. And I've spoken to, I said the former parliamentary rep started it under the CDP. And that's to show the magnanimity of members on this side. And of course, he took a lot of criticism for it. But I've spoken to the road all the way to the end, because the road is in a mess. And there are certain members of this House I know that do frequent the area and they can testify to the condition of the road. Madam Speaker, I look for the rehabilitation of the Bassa Joseph Main Road. Madam Speaker, the residents of Bassa Joseph will this weekend put money together and have a kudme to put concrete to fill in the potholes on the main road. That is how bad it is. And Madam Speaker, I look for the rehabilitation of the Marigot Main Road. Marigot is a premier tourism location in St. Lucia. And I'm not saying anything about tourism today, Madam Speaker. I will deal with it in the next debate that we have. So in this vein, Madam Speaker, I wish to appeal to the Minister of Infrastructure to treat those roads as urgent. And under the headings of reconstruction and rehabilitation of roads, and the heading of secondary and tertiary road rehabilitation, if he can at least provide some relief to the residents of Bassa Joseph, Goodlands, and Marigot. Madam Speaker, I look for mention of a construction of a court for the youth of Fuasho, the resurfacing of the Cicero playing field, and the completion of the Marigot playing field. Madam Speaker, Fuasho needs a court. The young people in Fuasho are playing on the road. This road is actually the main road to the hospital. The ambulances, all emergency vehicles traverse on that very road. It is a hazard. The last government acquired the land and the property on the land, and the court was designed by the agricultural section. I hope, Madam Speaker, that there can be some relief to the young people of Fuasho and a court be built. Madam Speaker, there was already agreement to resurface the Cicero playing field. It's a very small field. It cannot take 11 aside. And Madam Speaker, it has not been done, and I want to appeal to the Minister to give it some consideration. And Madam Speaker, the Marigot playing field was 95% finished by June last year. It needed a final top dressing and rolling. Now I know the Minister has plans. I've spoken to him about it, and he's explained to me what his vision is and where he wants to go with it. But I want to appeal to him that it is 95% finished. It would not take more than a couple loads of sand to finish the top dressing and to just roll it off. It will not take away from the long-term planning of the ministry. Madam Speaker, the field is being taken over by wild grass, what called pad pool. And when that takes over a playing field, it's almost doomed. Madam Speaker, I wish to appeal to the Minister to give some consideration. Under all the monies that we heard about last night in the National Lotteries Authority, because the previous Minister explained that almost every month, $500,000 in revenue is earned from the national lotteries. Now, if we calculate from June last year to this year, that's almost $4 million or more that would have been collected, or at least available for use by the Department of Youth and Sports. And I'm only repeating what I learned in this Honorable House, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure the Minister can always correct me if I am wrong. But in $450,000, Madam Speaker, surely $20,000 is not too much to ask for to finish the playing field for the young people of Marigot. Madam Speaker, I looked for some Honorable Minister speaks, and Madam Speaker, $18.6 million is allocated for the CDP this year, that he will provide more information on how it's going to be used. The two models that have been used for CDP, that used by the previous UWP administration and that used by the previous SLP administration. And Madam Speaker, we are waiting to know exactly how it is. The Minister did explain on public television that less emphasis will be placed on infrastructure and more on training people in the various communities. I wish to appeal to the Honorable Minister to consider that there are still huge deficiencies in the physical conditions faced by communities all over St. Lucia. This budget, like many budgets before it, is laden with provisions for training. So maybe we should still focus, Honorable Minister, maybe we should still focus on the communities. I appeal to the Minister to allow parliamentary reps to have a say in what training is needed, who should be trained, and who does the training. Because, Madam Speaker, we have training under multiple agencies in this budget. NAPS, under Social Development Fund, many other agencies already doing training. The one fund that has been used for infrastructural development, Madam Speaker, why should it be diverted to training as well? But that's another story for another day. Madam Speaker, I note an increase in the allocation for Solid Waste Management Authority on page 448. It increases from 1.7 million to 2.58 million. Madam Speaker, there is a chronic solid waste problem in some of the communities of Castries South. And Madam Speaker, recently I undertook a tour of Castries South with the mayor, I think he's now the CEO of the CCC, and a number of other officials, to tour Castries South with me, to show them the state of the communities in Castries South as it relates to solid waste. And I have asked, yes, Madam Speaker, in 10 months, all the programs have been abandoned. There was a program in place of caretakers for every part of the constituency. That has been stopped. Now, Madam Speaker, I am not here to fight or argue. If the government decided it wanted to have a different policy, that's its decision. That's its decision. But the fact is, the consequence of that shift has been a tremendous increase in the solid waste problem. Well, I don't know if you can increase the problem, but there's a tremendous deterioration of the management of solid waste in the constituency. And I think if it was removed, it should be replaced with something else. And I am not chastising anybody for changing the policy or plans of the government, but the consequence is that the constituency is the poorer for it. Madam Speaker, through you, I wish to say to the Honourable Member of Castries South is that Castries South needs a proud program. I know the allocation of 13.7 million, and I wish that the following communities be considered: Bannan, Monlatok, and Goodlands. Madam Speaker, those of you who pass Bannan by where the small playing field exists, you could look to the hill and see the houses on the hill. A few years ago, there was a landslide at the bottom of the hill. Madam Speaker, it's a disaster waiting to happen. I appeal to the Honourable Minister, and I'm available. And I'm sure when he comes to meet me, we'll discuss West Indies cricket outside of the public glare. And I'll educate him on. Let us tour the communities. I want to take you to Bannan and to show you what's happening in those communities. I want to take you to Monlatok, opposite the Governor General's residence, all the way down to the entrance to buy sandals. And the persons who live on the hillside, what they experience. Down to the bottom where the river exists. They've actually had a child who lost her life when the river rose. Let us store it and for you to see the consequence of unplanned development. I want to take you to Goodlands. Oh, and I'm sure I forgot to mention, Honourable Member, the former Prime Minister, former Minister of Finance, and member of Castries North is very well versed with Monlatok, and he can bear testimony to the need for some remedial work to be done in this area. I'm not suggesting anything unworthy about him. He is simply raised in that area. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Goodlands.
What did you raise?
Madam Speaker, Goodlands. For years, Madam Speaker, there are families in Goodlands, Madam Speaker, who came as indentured servants just after slavery ended. And they've been on lands, Madam Speaker, and they still do not have title to it. There are people in that area. Half of Goodlands is represented by the member for Castries South East. And I invite him to tour Goodlands with me, Madam Speaker, for him to learn for the first time, Madam Speaker, the true sentiments of the people of Goodlands, Madam Speaker. They need help, and it's a very serious issue, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was pleased last night to hear from the member for Grosili that the aftercare program will be continued and Fuasho and Cicero will remain. As I know now, it continues in Fuasho, but it has to be restarted in Sisera. This is a critical program, Madam Speaker. If you drive along the hospital road just after school and you see the number of young people on the streets, they came out of school and they're actually on the street recreating. The aftercare program keeps them in a controlled environment, enhancing their learning and keeping them focused on what are the critical ingredients for success in a difficult world. And to continue this program, Madam Speaker, as I look on page 403 and I see an allocation of $500,000, Madam Speaker, I trust Cicero and Fuasho will get its fair share. Madam Speaker, I am pleased also to hear of the Youth Empowerment for Life project on page 493, allocation of $3.2 million. And the Honourable Member said that he will provide more information in the policy debate. And I'm anxiously awaiting to hear what he's saying, because I support these programs, Madam Speaker. Unlike some people in this country that believe when you spend money on people, when you spend money on social skills, when you spend money on giving individuals greater self-esteem and a sense of identity is a waste of money, I don't think so. And Madam Speaker, that's a theme I will come back to at an appropriate time. Again, back to the member for Castries South East. Let me tell you, so much of what I need has to come from the Minister of Castries South East. I really believe we and I need to have that discussion about West Indies cricket. Madam Speaker, BNTF 7th and 8th program, $8.7 million and $2 million respectively. A road has been started in Goodlands, Lower Goodlands, crossing the river. There was not enough money to complete it. And I trust, Madam Speaker, that the Honourable Member will ensure that more monies are made available to continue the road and to bring greater relief to the people of Goodlands. I sometimes ask them, how do you go out and come back after 12 in the night, especially after having a good time? How do you cross the river? How do you even get to your homes? But work has started. It started under the previous government, and I ask that it be continued for the sake of the people of Castries South. Madam Speaker, the second question, and I'll move a little quicker, Madam Speaker. Does this estimates reduce taxes and deliver on the promises of the government? This was a government, when in opposition, that said taxes were bad in this country. This country was overburdened. It was stifling growth, and that they would dismantle the tax structure in this country, giving more relief and more space for business to thrive and for people to have more ching-ching in their pocket.
That's what we've done. Reduced VAT.
You've reduced VAT. But, Madam Speaker, can you ask the Honourable Member, what has been the difference? Have you seen any reduction in prices in the supermarkets? Ask any St. Lucian, ask any supermarket operator. Have there been any reduction in the prices? Madam Speaker, there was a promise that taxes would be removed. But do we see this in this budget? The previous members have spoken about the airport development tax, page 8, recurrent expenditure for the Department of Finance, an increase of $18.3 million, Madam Speaker. Can I ask you a question, Madam Speaker? If these monies are for the redevelopment of the airport, should they not be in escrow as against? Can someone answer that question to me? And Madam Speaker, since the member for Ancillary is now the authority on the economy and its management, probably he can answer that to me. He can answer that for me. Madam Speaker, there is, I will deal with that in the budget, don't worry. Madam Speaker, increase in collection from excise tax on imports, page 8, of $17.4 million, an increase from $86.7 million to $104.1 million. Can I ask, Madam Speaker, is a new tax being introduced? What is the basis for that increase in the collection on excise tax on imports, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, in the budget, in the expected revenue, it shows that under CIP, the revenue for 2016-2017, Madam Speaker, was $5.9 million. $5.9 million. You would recall that the Honorable Prime Minister addressed this House in December last year and said that to date the CIP had collected only $6 million. Listen to me, Madam Speaker. Up to December last year, the CIP had collected only $6 million. And Madam Speaker, you could refer to Hansard, the sitting of the House in December last year. But up to March this year, the budget estimate says only 5.9 million was collected. Madam Speaker, how long will we persist with this lack of transparency and accountability in the Citizenship by Investment Program? It is why, Madam Speaker, that the Prime Minister did not want a debate in this House on CIP. But no matter what the Prime Minister... You found out what?
We found out about your father from the British press, so you can't talk about that.
Madam Speaker, that's a very good one. He says they found out about Jufali in the British press. But Madam Speaker, what was wrong with Jufali? Launch a commission of inquiry. Don't talk, act. And you know what, Madam Speaker? Very soon the courts will decide on the Jufali issue. But I will tell you very soon, in this honorable House, we will have a revelation on how many diplomatic passports have been given, to whom, and all the emerging stories about diplomatic passports and awards that have taken place. But that's for another time, Madam Speaker. And I hope the honorable member will not be shortened by the discussions that will come out on that day. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
And they have one surname.
Madam Speaker, how long will we persist with this lack of transparency and accountability? And at the right time, Madam Speaker, I said, it's a matter before the courts, so everything will come out, Madam Speaker. Because, Madam Speaker, people say things, and sometimes they need to know carefully what they're saying. And there's always a time of reckoning, and time and patience is all that it takes. Madam Speaker, under SSDF allocations, I heard the honorable member last night said that he was always against the NICE program. And he explained that the reason why he was against it was that he did not believe it should be standing alone, that there were savings that could be accrued from merging everything under SSDF. Now on the side, Madam Speaker, I have shared my thoughts with the honorable member on the comments that he made. Madam Speaker, I believe if you're the Minister of Equity and Social Justice, you must always say things that promote community harmony and promotes the integration of people in the communities. That nothing should be said which appears to be divisive or which appears to be tribal. And I've said so to the honorable member. Even if he believes it is true what he said, as a Minister of Equity and Social Justice night, that not just his words. So I look forward to the actions of the Minister of Equity and Social Justice to show a manifestation of that belief in the concepts of equity and social justice. But the Minister, and listen carefully to his words, he did not agree to NICE because NICE should not be standalone, it should be under SSDF, and it could be more efficiently implemented there. And I asked him, do you agree with NAPS in the office of the Prime Minister? Because NICE was in the office of the Prime Minister, you disagreed if it being located there. But in this budget, NAPS, do not answer, honorable member, I will answer for you. I know he does not agree with NAPS being in the office of the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, you notice NICE was $90 million in the budget and it was removed. But NAPS is replaced. Madam Speaker, NAPS is nothing new. The only difference between this NAPS and the NAPS that Kenny Anthony, as Minister of the Honorable Member for Beaufort South, when he presented his budget in 2012, he presented NAPS, N-A-P-P-S, National Apprenticeship and Placement Program. This one is NAPS. The government is taking a nap, a true nap, because this is not new, Prime Minister, Madam Speaker. Dr. Kenny Anthony presented in 2012 NAPS, National Apprenticeship and Placement Program. It's the same concept. You read it and it is the same thing. Nothing new. So, Madam Speaker, 19 million was removed for NICE, but then 10 million is placed for NAPS, and Home Care gets 5.3 million under SSDF, a total of about 15 million. So it's a social, I agree, Honorable Member, Madam Speaker, please tell the Honorable Member that I agree with him We are on the same page. We believe those programs are needed. But Prime Minister will say more about NAPS, and then we will deal with it. The Minister last night, Honorable Member for Grosile, spoke of youth empowerment for life. In that same budget address, the Honorable Member for Beaufort South presented YEP, Youth Empowerment Program. It's a twisting and a refining maybe, but it is the same basic trajectory. So, Madam Speaker, can you let the Honorable Member know that I support his program in the SSDF? And my one disappointment so far, SSDF was located in Castries South, and the Honorable Member removed it, and he has placed it in Colony House on the John Compton Highway. And I will not say who owns Colony House. But I know there was reason why it had to move from Castries South. But I am disappointed, because whenever I needed something, I could run down the road by SSDF office and speak to the officers. He's removed me. He's removed that luxury and that privilege from me. But, Madam Speaker, I will continue to call the Honourable Member and represent the people of Castries South. Madam Speaker, I cannot Agency 21. Madam Speaker, when I heard that the Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for Miko South, said on an international stage for the world to hear that our patrimony is measured by our credit rating, I said someone was making a parody of him, making fun of him, and I thought to myself, that was not very nice. But, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has demonstrated, the Minister of Finance has demonstrated for the removal of the grant to the National Trust that this is a vindictive and juvenile response to the opposition provided by the National Trust to the plans of the government. It is a vindictive Minister of Finance that cares only about credit ratings and not the patrimony of St. Lucia. The hills and valleys that our anthem speaks of which the National Trust ensures that they are maintained and sustained, that the Prime Minister loves to market for tourism, he's now saying do away with it, and he's removing the grant to the National Trust. Madam Speaker, I want it placed on record that I think the subvention should be restored to the National Trust. And Madam Speaker, in the policy debate, more will be said about the National Trust and its role in St. Lucia. Madam Speaker, I need to refer to the member for Procedural Saltibus that under the allocations for the Department of Commerce, the subsidy provision of $4 million was removed. And the Minister of Finance explained yesterday that it was removed because the price of flour and sugar and rice had fallen. Rice and sugar had fallen, so therefore the subsidy was removed. Madam Speaker, reflect on those words, that poor people in hard economic times are looking forward to the relief in price. And the Minister of Finance is saying, because there was a drop in price, they've completely removed the subsidy of $4 million. Madam Speaker, it means that the price of flour and rice will go back up, Madam Speaker.
Come on.
Madam Speaker, the same way it dropped and it rose and it dropped and it rose, it will rise again. And then you'll put it back again. Okay, Madam Speaker, let it be recorded in this House that the next time there's an increase in the price of those basic commodities, the government will start back subsidizing it. This is a promise made in this honorable House. But this is the same government who, when it was reduced by the previous administration, cried. The Prime Minister cried. Let me tell you, Madam Speaker, there are a couple of things about the Prime Minister. You may not like him, but you'll sit back and you'll say, what a quality he has. He says anything in any situation to suit any occasion, and he can cry on demand. He can cry on demand. The Prime Minister cried that there was a reduction in the price of flour and sugar. He literally cried on the subsidy. And then it hurt him. It hurt him. So, Madam Speaker, I need to ask a question. In these figures presented, the estimates, Madam Speaker, do you see a reduction in the price of rice, of sugar, of flour, of electricity, of water? There are no reductions, Madam Speaker. All the crying was show, Madam Speaker. But you know, if you campaign on lies, you can only perpetuate your stay by lying more. But sooner or later, the lie. So, Madam Speaker, the third question I want to ask. The third question I want to ask, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I heard the member for ancillary canneries yesterday call the member for Castries' performance as mediocre. And he went on about being mediocre and mediocre, and he's repeating it this morning. Madam Speaker, in life, you learn certain things about respect and decency and decorum. But let me just remind the honorable member, he stood up and he spoke in a debate on estimates. He never cited one heading. Instead, he presented a document better suited to the next debate. He did not even realize he had come to the wrong party. And he was dressed in a three-piece suit when everybody's wearing beach clothing. He did not realize that. But he calls the honorable member of Castries is mediocre in his presentation. He cannot even realize for his own self that what he was doing was so misplaced. And some might want to call it mediocre at best. But Madam Speaker, the member for ancillary canneries, we go back a long way. They're looking for him in Montciso. We go back a long way. We actually, the Sandals Cricket Academy, we started it many, many years ago. I'm sure he can recall that. So we've had a long working relationship. And my advice to him, Madam Speaker, is that he probably should pay a little more attention to some of the seniors in his party and solicit their advice and guidance as to how he should conduct himself in the House. Madam Speaker, but I want him to open his document on the estimates, himself and the member for Soufre, and let us proceed to do an examination. Because, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the question. The test for fiscal responsibility. Because this government, Madam Speaker, promised that it would never present a deficit budget. Never. The Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Senator Eubolus Raymond, said it over and over. No deficit budget. The Minister of Finance said it. No deficit budget. And I sat and I wondered whether my own understanding of what a deficit budget is was wrong. Because how are you not going to present a deficit budget in such trying economic times? And I said probably the Minister of Finance in the Ministry of Finance is a brilliant economist. But then I remember the member for Castries North once called him a bush doctor. So I really wondered whether or not this budget will be a test of whether he's an economic guru or whether he's a bush doctor. So we were a bush doctor, the member for Castries North. At that time, the honourable member was contesting for the Solution Labour Party. but Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister stated that government must be run like a business with himself as CEO. So, Madam Speaker, let us judge the figures presented by the CEO. And I want the member for Soufre, and the member for Answer Committee to open your pages, Madam Speaker. I think it is
We're still waiting for explanation about what really happened with Jafarian.
summary.
And you refuse, you're talking about everything, you're not talking about that.
Madam Speaker, Roman numeral 3, Madam Speaker. Roman numeral 3, Madam Speaker.
Governance and transparency.
Madam Speaker, we need to ask the CEO / Minister of Finance, the member for Miku South, which business operates by reducing its income and increasing its operating expenses, as demonstrated in the estimates before the House. It reduces the approved estimates of 2016-2017 of $1.164 billion. Please look at the page, Roman numeral 3, summary sheet, to $1.158 billion for financial year 2017-2018. It means based on what was projected for last year, the Minister of Finance is predicting less revenue. But, and Madam Speaker, let me also point out, you will notice that for the turnout, less revenue was collected. But the Honorable Minister of Finance came into this House in December and told us that revenue collection was 102% to date, meaning it was beyond projected. If in December you were 2% more than what was projected, but by the end of March you are below end of year projection. What does that suggest? What does that suggest? It suggested there was a decrease in revenue collection in the latter part of the year towards the ending of the financial year. That's what it suggests. And make note, Madam Speaker. But the Minister of Finance, I want you to refer to the figures, right, is predicting a decrease in revenue from what was forecasted for the last budget, but an increase in expenditure. Is this how you run a successful business, Madam Speaker? But Madam Speaker, let us examine the 5 critical indicators which are presented to assess the fiscal responsibility of this budget. And let me just say, the Honourable Member for Castries East never said that the economy was running beautifully and was a success. He never said that. He said there was an improvement in the economy. And Madam Speaker, the opening line of the Minister of Finance yesterday started by saying there was a marked improvement in the fiscal performance of the economy. The Minister of Finance said it yesterday. He said it. And I will prove it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let's look at current surplus. Current surplus, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, government earns revenue from its normal functioning, from taxes, fees, licenses, user charges, etc. And this represents what we call recurrent revenue. The equivalent in a family, Madam Speaker, is a family earning money from salaries and from overtime worked. So that's recurrent revenue. But the government wants to spend on its normal activities and commitments, on wages and transfers to other body. An equivalent is a family paying its bills and sending some money to a child who's at the University of the West Indies. So you collect all your money from your salaries and overtime, you want to pay all your bills and send some money to your child who's in Barbados. Will the family be able to do this according to this budget? But let me also add, Madam Speaker, in that consideration, you're not repairing the roof, you're not repairing the fence, you're not paying your car loan, you're not paying your interest on the debt. In the concept of current surplus, Minister, hold on, you will come to it. In that situation,
Honourable Member, you have 15 more minutes within which to complete your presentation.
Thank you very much. I will finish, Madam Speaker. So, when you discuss in the concept of current surplus, the Prime Minister is already telling me no. All I'm doing is trying to explain that concept, Madam Speaker. The concept of current surplus is a very simple one. You earn your you do not pay your debts, the interest on your debts, and you have no capital expenditure. In that case, Madam Speaker, the government, according to the statement, has a surplus of $46 million. 46 million surplus. But remember, you've not fixed your house, you've not fixed the fence, and you've not paid your debts nor the interest, but you have a surplus of 46 million. Do you think that's bad, Madam Speaker, or it's good? Compare it to 81 million in 2015-2016, and expected 84 million for last year. So you move from 81 million in 2015-2016 surplus to 84 million for last year to a projected surplus in those estimates of only $46 million. Any CEO who presents that will fail. And this Minister of Finance fails on the score of the current surplus. Let's look at the recurrent balance, Madam Speaker, and this is critical. Again, government earns its money from the normal functioning as stated. The same analogy with a family. It earns its money from salaries and from overtime worked. But this time, government wants to spend on its normal activities and commitments, but also wants to pay its loan and its interest on its loan. If government does not pay its loan, then it will find itself in trouble, so it wants to pay it. But it does not build any road or fix any school. Similarly, a family wants to pay all its bills, but will also pay the house loan, car loan, and student loan, but will not fix the roof or the fence. According to this budget, the government is in trouble as it cannot do so. The government will be short by $78 million. So let me tell you it again. The government will be short in the recurrent by 78 million. And compare that, Madam Speaker, to the government short by 37 million in 2015-2016 and 37.2 million last year. Things are getting worse, Madam Speaker. The CEO fails again, Madam Speaker. The third one, the primary surplus, Madam Speaker. And all of that is on the summary sheet of the estimates, Madam Speaker. This time, Madam Speaker, the government decides that it will do all it can to earn as much money as possible, but it will not borrow. It will earn money as usual from its normal functioning, but it will also decide to sell some assets and obtain as many grants as it can. Similarly, a family will earn money through salary and overtime. They will probably sell a gold ring or a chain to make some money, sell a piece of land, and maybe ask on fixing schools, health centers, roads. But it will not pay its debt. It just wants to fix schools and roads. It will not fix its debt. Madam Speaker, under this budget, the government fails miserably again. This time, Madam Speaker, there is a deficit of $50.7 million. It is short by $50.7 million. In 2015, there was a surplus of $28.8 million, a surplus. And last year, it was expected to have a surplus of $120 million. But this year, there's a deficit of $50. There was money, Madam Speaker, last year to put towards debt. This year, there will be none. The CEO fails again, Madam Speaker. Then, Madam Speaker, let's look at the overall balance. And I want the member for ancillary to go back to the summary page. You need to follow, Honorable the member for Castries East. Look at the figures. No, I'm not going to. Let me tell you. Madam Speaker, the overall balance. You must learn to say that outside. Again, this time, government decides for the overall balance, Madam Speaker, that it will raise all the money it can by whatever means, but it will not borrow. The overall balance, Madam Speaker. Listen to that one, the overall balance. Madam Speaker, the government wants to spend on all its normal activities. It wants to repair all the roads in St. Lucia, all the schools. It wants to pay interest on loans, but it will not pay loans, principals, or refund citizens. Government still cannot do that under this budget. It is short by a whooping $220.9 million. Compare that to being short by $127 million in 2015-2016, an expected short deficit of $62.9 million for last year. Think about it, Madam Speaker. Under the overall balance, in 2015-2016, government was short by $127 million. It's expected last year that government would be short by $62.9 million. But under this estimates, government will be short by $220.9 million. Again, Madam Speaker, any CEO that presents those figures will fail before the Board of Directors. And my last, the fifth indicator, Madam Speaker, is there any borrowing? St. Jude's have nothing to do with that. Get serious. In this case, Madam Speaker, in this case, government will earn and sale of assets, and it will seek all the grants it can find. In other words, the government will do everything it can to raise money, Madam Speaker, because the government wants to spend on all its normal activities. It wants to waste money on consultants. It wants to waste money on excessive traveling. It wants to repair some schools. It wants to repair some roads. It has to pay its loans. And Madam Speaker, in this case, this government, according to these estimates, will have to borrow money like never before in the history of St. Lucia. According to these estimates, government will borrow $345.4 million for this year alone. Compare that, Madam Speaker, to $246 million for 2015-2016. And expected for last year, only $183.1 million for last year. Things are really getting bad. But, Madam Speaker, let me tell you how bad it is. Let me tell you how bad it is. I quote from the Minister of Finance budget statement in May 2012, where he was responding to the previous 5 years of the United Workers' Party under the stewardship of Honorable Stephenson King, the member for Castries North. And the Honorable Minister of Finance said then, over the past 5 years, the former administration borrowed a total of $949 million. That means over 5 years, borrowed a total of $949 million. Put in context, Madam Speaker, 949 over 5 years. This 1 year, $345 million. The previous UWP administration under Stevenson King borrowed 949 in 5 years. This Minister of Finance, no, Madam Speaker, you know, I'm telling about statistics. You know sometimes what the members do? They look at social and economic review and they subtract 2016 from 2011 and they say that's what you borrow. That's net debt, because during that period, debt is being retired. So the net debt, if you look at, for example, Madam Speaker, how much was borrowed each year and you add it, and I can give you all the figures, Madam Speaker, $949 million was borrowed in 5 years. This Minister of Finance will borrow $345 million in his first year alone. This CEO, this Minister of Finance has failed in the estimates, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I end with the introduction of my presentation to the forthcoming debate on the policy statement. These figures suggest a Minister of Finance who thinks that St. Lucia is a lovely piece of real estate to be developed according to his whims, fancies, and some may add, the dreams of his father. But to do so, Madam Speaker, he must avoid a coup d'etat in his cabinet. So to make the detractors happy, he gives as much as he can, so they will be silent for the time being. Because, Madam Speaker, I'll tell you something. Of course we need economic growth in this country. Of course we need the stimulus in the member for Procedural who said, the Prime Minister saying he does not want to leave what he has inherited. Every Prime Minister and member for Castries North will tell you that. You want to do everything to make the country as developed and as sufficient as you can, but you don't have the resources to do it, and you have to make difficult choices. You have to be able to give up some things. But in this budget, no tough decisions are made. Nothing is given up. This estimate, Madam Speaker, is putting St. Lucia on a slippery slope, Madam Speaker. If it works out, Madam Speaker, if for some reason this works, Madam Speaker, then we'll all have to apologize. But, Madam Speaker, if it fails, we have no choice but to go to the IMF. You are borrowing $345 million in 1 year. In 1 year. And yes, Madam Speaker, there are a lot of programs in here that I support, because I believe they can bring benefit to the cost of St. Lucia. But this budget has no regard for the future of St. Lucia and where we are taking St. Lucia. It fails on every single fiscal indicator. It fails on every single one. It shows a deterioration of what the last 5 years of hard work, and the Labour Party paid the price in the elections for all those tough decisions that it took. There's an abandonment of that foundation for economic stability and sustainability that was laid by the last government. It was painful, but it had to be done, Madam Speaker. It was done to ensure that our future can be prosperous, that it can be prosperity in this land, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the time that you've allocated me.
Honourable Member for Micoud North, Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Incidentally, Madam Speaker, this appears to be the first time that I'm rising in this honorable House since the people of Micoud North again expressed their confidence in me as their MP. I therefore beg your indulgence, Madam Speaker, as I convey to the people of Micoud North my sincere thanks for their continuous support, prayers, and good counsel. I stand here because of your faith in me. I stand here because you have yet again demonstrated that you believe in the philosophy of the party to which I belong and the party which has committed to delivering to you and your families that which you need. Madam Speaker, there is something rather humbling about starting one's political career in opposition. But equally, it affords you a perspective that otherwise would not have been had if you were at your first attempt at the polls, won and assumed a government seat. Perhaps that is even more so in hindsight, having sat across the aisle for 4.5 years and having had the privilege of witnessing, of observing, and of experiencing life in opposition and what that means for the people who reside in a seat held by a member of the opposition. Madam Speaker, permit me to provide a slight preamble regarding the constitution of the ministry for which I am responsible, and that is the Ministry for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development. Madam Speaker, it is important that I do so because you will recall in the Prime Minister's opening remarks as Minister responsible for finance, he admitted the necessity for us to exercise fiscal responsibility and prudence. And in some cases, that may have resulted in a zero alongside for which I am responsible to explain the rationale, because I fully appreciate the position espoused by the Minister responsible for finance, that wherever possible, we should endeavor to, 1, leverage existing synergies, maximize on the resources that already exist, and resist the temptation to ask for more resources, because more resources do not necessarily translate into greater levels of implementation. In fact, we have been agonizing over the fact stalled, have been stymied, or are in a semi-comatose state. Why? So is the answer necessarily more resources? Or should the focus be on enhancing levels of efficiency so that we can make the most out of every dollar allocated?
True.
So let us not, Madam Speaker, be distracted by the zeros. Let us instead, and more of that will unfold in the debate to follow in the next couple of weeks as we delve into the policy. But the onus is on us as sitting ministers of government to ensure that the talented people under our watch do more with what they already have, or where we can, do more with less. Madam Speaker, I could not resist the temptation to begin my perusal of the estimates by seeking to discover what's in there for Mico North. I see it in large respect as a primary commitment. For were it not for these people, I would not be standing here in this house. Madam Speaker, I want to applaud the continuing efforts of this government, this administration, and the goodwill expressed by the government and people of China on Taiwan, as again you see an allocation for the CDP, which I hope, Madam Speaker, will redound to the benefits of the citizens as intended. And Madam Speaker, permit me an additional 30 seconds on the CDP, because it is a program to which I have an emotional attachment, and I will tell you why. In a previous life, when I assumed my first experience in the public service, thanks to my colleague and former Prime Minister, the Honorable Stephenson King, the first task that he assigned me read thus: Dr. Rigobert, at a bipartisan parliamentary meeting that was held in the previous year, it was agreed that a fund should be made available, accessible by all 17 MPs to undertake small projects in their respective constituencies. Will you be so kind as to craft the program? With the able guidance of the then PS and other talented members of the Ministry of Finance, we sought to undertake just that. And so I've always seen that program as a program that affords MPs that level of latitude to respond in quick time to the needs of the people in their respective constituencies. I beg, Madam Speaker, that we remain true to the intention that was expressed in the genesis of that program. And I will not want to raise the hopes of the people of Mico North and to suggest that they will receive an extraordinary amount for perhaps the amounts that were lost in the previous years, but to say simply that I share the confidence that on this occasion we will get the amounts due to us. And I ask that that be the same for other members in this honorable House. For Babano, in his ministerial portfolio as Minister responsible for agriculture, where I have noticed that there's an allocation for the maintenance of agriculture feeder roads, that the farmers of Mico North have in the last 9 months already experienced the level of efficiency that he is known for. And I wish to thank you, Honorable Member, for the rehabilitation work that has already started with respect to the farm roads in the constituency of Mico North. And that is why under head 41, under line 256, I see rehabilitation of farms post-Tropical Storm Matthew, and is here that I trust that the people of Mico North can continue to experience your generosity and your efficiency. In case we forget, Madam Speaker, Mico North is highly dependent on agriculture and on farming. And so when I see that an effort is being made to address their needs, I must applaud that effort, and I must give hope to the farmers that their concerns are being addressed and will be addressed in the next fiscal year as well. Under Head 43, Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Energy, Madam Speaker, I must say that when we discovered that an allocation hovering around the amount of $14 million would be dedicated to infrastructural works, I know, Madam Speaker, that the people of La Pointe are expectant. I know, too, that the constituents who live along the St. Mary Road have new hope. I know also that the residents who live near the culvert in Cooley Town can receive some relief and not have to sleep with one eye open when they hear the heavy rains. Permit me, Madam Speaker, to make a special plea on behalf of the residents of Magretut. I tell you, Madam Speaker, every time it rains, the anxiety that fills my heart, knowing that within minutes I will have to go to the bridge or I'll receive that first call, or sometimes I go ahead of time and in anticipation of the rising waters and to give good counsel and advice. Let me here say, Madam Speaker, that while we have over the last couple years been undertaking desilting work after desilting work, it is high time that we come up with a comprehensive, sustainable solution to the flooding problem in Magretut. And I want to be fair and to forewarn the residents that they need to be open to the idea that one of the options may be that they have to relocate to higher ground. Madam Speaker, I had promised on an election platform that as the crown seat of the United Workers' Party, that Mico North would receive a new shine in its crown. And I found some of the gloss today. It is to be found under the DVRP allocation, an allocation which sits in the ministry that falls under the good watch of my colleague from Bexon, Forestier, and neighboring communities. Thank you. It is here, Madam Speaker, that I want the people for Mico North to know that the health center will be financed. And that, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the over 200 residents of Mico North who turned up to that community meeting to say to us that the health center should be located at the old site. I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank the minister for acceding to that request. It means a lot to the people of Mico North. It is there too, Madam Speaker, incidentally, that the schools that are being built, as I move to my ministerial portfolio slightly, the Choiseul School will be built, and I'm given every assurance, notwithstanding all the mischief that prevailed initially, I've been given every assurance that construction is due to begin shortly. Especially given that it is one of those programs which suffers from low or slow implementation. And I want to appeal to you, Mr. Minister, to see to it that that project benefits from levels of efficiency yet seen. Madam Speaker, it may seem slight, but under road safety, I want to highlight the correlation between that head and the safety of school children crossing the roads to access their respective schools. We have several requests from various schools around the country asking for pedestrian crossings to be built, and therefore under head 43, though it may not be a very large sum, I trust that the minister will be able to put the money allocated to some use regarding the safety of our school children as they seek to cross the roads to access their respective schools. Madam Speaker, I also want to make reference to another line item, law revision, head 32 under the Attorney General's chambers. And, Madam Speaker, it is important that we understand that within the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development, one of the reasons that we crafted the ministry in that way is precisely because we had made 3 cursory observations which unfortunately are turning out to be true. One, that there is duplication of effort across government agencies. And as far as is possible, we should seek to harmonize and consolidate our efforts. In that regard, therefore, with respect to the Department of Gender Relations, under this line item, I have been given every assurance by the good Attorney General that some of the laws that concern women, children, and families will receive the attention. The Domestic Violence Proceedings Act of 1994, Madam Speaker, is in dire need of revision. Similarly, the Criminal Code, Section 139, sections of the Criminal Code that speak to matters of domestic violence, the protection of children, discrimination, and the like. But even more importantly, Madam Speaker, that while we continue to participate and sign up to various conventions, that we give our commitment to undertake to enact laws that will give true meaning to the various conventions and treaties to which we sign up. In that regard, Mr. AG, and I want to alert you and your team, as they have started, that they will be required to engage even more meaningfully, more intimately with that department to ensure that our laws are brought up to date and in alignment with the various changes taking place in our global economy or global space. Madam Speaker, gender mainstreaming is very important. I recall very vividly in the months preceding the last election that we were greeted with gruesome news of one kind of another, and much of the debate focused on punitive measures. Madam Speaker, I am delighted that under the ministry, which is headed by my good colleague, Minister Montoute, and in collaboration with other agencies such as the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, the Ministry of Education, we are putting together comprehensive programs to deal with behavioral, nip the early signs of deviance, whether through the after-school program where they are actively engaged. I must confess I'm not at all comfortable with that nomenclature. I think we need to name the program appropriately so that it reflects the intention, which is to modify and adjust behavior so that it is in keeping with that which is required for good citizenship in our beautiful democracy. The Youth Empowerment for Life project, therefore, is something that I applaud. And the people of Mico North can stand ready to benefit from this. Madam Speaker, the Economic and Social Review articulates what I inherited in education. And every member in this House has been furnished with a copy. I need not revisit the content, except to say necessarily that perhaps the issue has to do with consolidation, harmonization, streamlining. In that regard, therefore, I make reference to the offerings that we have under that ministry for the NELU. And, you know, Madam Speaker, permit me to say, this government is committed to affording its citizens second chances. Some people between the ages of 5 and 16 perhaps have not yet developed a sense of self and the importance of taking their schooling seriously. And it is important to us as an administration that we continue with these programs that afford our citizens a second shot at life. Many of these programs reside within our NELU unit or NSDC or are conducted by TVET. And we have sprouts of similar programs all over the government. So even before the government, the budget exercise had started, I asked a simple question. Are we not serving the same demographic group? Are we not, in effect, responding to the same or similar needs, requiring us to buy industrial size or approved equipment, find the physical space, find the facilitators, find the teachers? Can we not harness that which we have and consolidate that offering? And Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the team that has been constituted to look at what is offered through the NSDC or through NEP or through TVET, all of which have their own leadership structures and on their own budgetary requests. Can we not pool these things and save the government some money while maintaining or increasing our levels of efficiency? And Madam Speaker, that is why the SMILES program was not funded in a traditional way, because the intention is that when that program is consolidated, whatever nomenclature it assumes, it will still respond to the need. And that is the important consideration. Madam Speaker, in that regard, I'm delighted to note that the Caribbean Youth Empowerment Program continues to be funded and is delivered with great levels of efficiency through the NSDC, and I want to applaud the efforts of the leadership of NSDC and the team as they continue to deliver such programs. We live in a knowledge economy. We are told effectively we have smartphones, tablets, not the tablet Coco or consider GG, but we have tablets, iPads, you name it. But I will say what I have always said, even before I entered politics, that it is not sufficient to equip our citizens or our students with the artifacts of technology without the appropriate accompanying program and capability and prepare them for the knowledge economy in which we function. So the anxiety that has ensued regarding the laptop program, may I take this opportunity simply to advise that, as I have always indicated, it is not sufficient to simply equip a student with an instrument without one, ensuring that there is programming that will seek to equip the student with adequate skills, and also to ensure that we have the bandwidth, because we are now discovering that, notwithstanding the fact that many of those students were equipped with those laptops, they are unable to use them while on the bandwidth. And that is why, Madam Speaker, what we do here is comprehensive, well thought through, well thought out. And so those who are anxious about simply equipping the students with a laptop will soon come to learn and understand the holistic program that the Ministry of Education is currently undertaking and will roll out shortly. Madam Speaker, as we engage in our ordinary lives, we hear of all kinds of lamentations about what a true citizen should look like. In that regard, the ministry has taken off the shelves a program which had been thought through a long time ago called the Education for Democratic Citizenship Program, which effectively is an expanded civics program, so that we can better equip our citizens to function as responsible, upright, talented citizens, not only in this democracy, but further afield as well. Madam Speaker, I want to, at this juncture, if you permit me, thank the team of persons who have ushered me through the last 9 months. Being in government is a learning experience, and some of us, if we are true to our call, will realize that as we endeavor to remain true to the commitments that we made to the people of this country, that there are little hurdles to ensure on the 6th of June 2016, the manifesto the moment after the result. That. And what we have presented with what is, and I have equipped all of my team with a copy, whether or not they already have one. Because the e-education initiative, as detailed under Head 52, and assisted by our good friends from China, Taiwan, remains common program remains for the and renovation of kitchens. The Methodist School, handsomely, my dear friend from Castries. But that also affords me the opportunity to speak of the kind of synergies that I refer to. Because where schools are in close proximity, does it not make good sense to consider one service provider furnishing the needs of the two schools, as in the case of the Methodist and the Anglican, for example, versus having to equip both schools? And that is the direction in which the ministry is going. I see here a note. It does not fall under my ministerial portfolio, but it's close to my heart. It's close to my heart because I know that there are talented sportsmen and women in Miku North who will applaud the return of the Elite Athletic Assistance and Talent Identification Program. Because if I am to be permitted to quote one of our stellar sportsmen in the person who very often young people either study or sports, either work or sports. And the intention of a program such as this is to lend assistance to young, talented, promising sportsmen and women within the framework that they can earn their keep. Thank because while we can boast of a Zephrinus Joseph, and we can boast of the young Emmanuel, and we can boast we have produced, sometimes we do not stop to pause on the hurdles and the challenges that they face, either within the school structure or within the place of employment, where they are not being able to hone their skill and to develop themselves professionally so that they can excel on the international stage. So I really want to applaud this, and I know that my sportsmen and women who sometimes find themselves in this challenge situation can now know there's an avenue that they can consider. Madam Speaker, in January of 2016, what used to be the Millennium Development Goals morphed into the now Sustainable Development Goals. And you will notice that under Head 55, Department of Sustainable Development, that there are several programs here listed, all of which have the explicit intention of, one, preparing our people for untoward hazards or adverse weather systems, undertaking educational programs so that we understand our own role in enhancing our resilience. 3, undertaking infrastructural work. 4, ensuring that by example and through various pilot programs, you will recall, for example, the installation of the solar system on the roof of government buildings. All of that is geared towards raising awareness of the importance to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and to engender thinking and an appreciation for renewable energy. I really must applaud that department, Sustainable Development, is able to near self-finance. And wouldn't that be beautiful if I'd have less and less reason to have to appeal and appeal, and that instead we have persons who are well equipped to scan the international environment and seek grant funding or funding that comes at a nominal cost to the country. In that regard, therefore, I really do want to applaud the various initiatives here listed under Head 55, championed by the department, and to say to the people of St. Lucia that this government is very committed to ensuring that our climate action agenda permeates and undergirds all that we do throughout this government. Madam Speaker, I've already spoken about the CDP and the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, and I want to suggest to the people of this country that whereas we inherited a situation where many of the schools have deteriorated to the point where some were deemed uninhabitable, and that we remain committed to restoring those buildings, that is not the sum total of our concern with respect to school infrastructure, Madam Speaker, is that instead of having to repaint blackboards every August and purchase new boxes of chalk, that instead we'll be ensuring that the wiring is kosher, that we have the equipment and the software for smart classrooms and smart schools. So I beg the further indulgence of some of the schools that I know to be in dire need of physical repair, and to say to them, the intention is not to focus narrowly or exclusively rather on physical rehabilitation, but that in reconceptualizing, I want to add also our efforts to ensure that all our schools become child-friendly schools and all our schools become safe schools. And when we speak of child-friendly schools, Madam Speaker, and safe schools, we speak not only of the physical infrastructure, we speak of the quality of training of the instructors, we speak of accessibility for persons with disabilities or with learning challenges. And so that spectrum of need cannot be narrowed exclusively to whether or not a school has a sound roof, though we see that as perhaps an important component. And so, Madam Speaker, I must confess that I resisted the temptation, and I guess I still have some latitude, to come here and boast of what is contained in this document, which is the EQUIP project for the Ministry of Education that speaks to some of what I have mentioned. But, Madam Speaker, truth be told, it has not been sealed as we understand the governance process and loan process. And that I want to thank the principals with who I met at the start of the last term. I want to thank my staff for revisiting this document so as to ensure that it is in keeping with producing students for the 21st century. As a politician, perhaps, Madam Speaker, it would have been tempting to see it through to the end rather quickly so I could boast about $33 million contained herein. But I have exercised due responsibility. We, as an administration, have exercised due responsibility and instead have asked the question, does this adequately speak to the needs of our students while we seek to prepare them for the 21st century? And that is why that $33 million may not be represented in here, because I would want for it to go through its due process before boasting about it. but I had to mention it, Madam Speaker, because I know that some of the actors in the sector know of it and may be wondering why the numbers are not represented here. And what's of the teachers we have, ensure that they are adequately equipped to deliver a fit-for-purpose that isn't here. And set for itself the goal to improve on what it inherited. Must set for itself that goal as a minimum. And that is why, Madam Speaker, you will hear and learn of some of the other initiatives that will be born out of that engagement primarily. And it speaks to, one, the conversion of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. And let us be very clear. And I know that some people are not terribly excited about any talk of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College being converted to university because, like you and me, Madam Speaker, they've heard it for a while. And that is why we too have adopted the position that we will not be pumping any more money into diagnosing the problem because we know what the problem is. Instead, we need to shift gears into implementation. Madam Speaker, we also know that we can't do everything. Even though we were to be converted into a university college, that
Honourable Member, you now have 15 minutes within which to complete your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I shall be respectful. I shall be respectful of the time allotted. Thank you. But permit me to end that point in saying that we recognize that we aren't able to teach or deliver on everything, and that is why you'll notice that we've made reference to the areas in which we think we have a competitive advantage and have demonstrated some competency or capacity, and that shall be the focus. Madam Speaker, the Department of Innovation is one that generates much excitement and curiosity. And let me say, first of all, that it is not limited to innovation in education. Allow me to tell through an account of my engagement with young Mr. Johannan Dujon what I mean by the Department of Innovation. I will recall, Madam Speaker, the repugnant stench of shores sometime in 2010. We have in Poilin. I recall the first community meeting that I had with them in April of 2011, and that is one of the first things they requested, and I'm grateful. But Mr. Ned, I can help you. If you can scoop up the seaweed and give it to me, I can do something with it. I said, really? I will do all that and gladly give it to you. And that was the start of my engagement with Mr. Dujon. Mr. Dujon, his innovation, his creativity has proven that what once posed a problem can, through creative thinking and innovation, become a solution to existing or anticipated problems, and further can be commercialized so that he can derive revenue from the activity, but also build upon the research capacity of the agriculture sector, the fishing subsector, and give this country a research profile that it so bitterly needs. He answered the question for me when he told his story last month when we celebrated his award by the Smithsonian Institute based in Washington for the kind of innovative work that he had done. And that is why what used to be the community access centers will become that hub. That play initially appeared to be wild ideas, but you will be entertained, listened to, and facilitated. in the way that the Ministry of Agriculture, in the way that the Department of Sustainable Development, in the way such that his commodity can win, very often is limited to technological innovation. It is more than that, Madam Speaker. It is social innovation as well. And it is here that you must, in problem solving and policy definition, so best practice, and we recognize the worth of that. You must give consideration to what is your local circumstance and adapt such that. And that is why you will, over the next couple months, see some of those access centers come over to education and become that innovation hub. Madam Speaker, and all of that is detailed under Head 22 on page 83. Madam Speaker, as you can tell, there's so much I had to say. I limited myself to the hour that I'm allotted. But I also want to give assurance to the young budding scientists in our community. Incidentally, Madam Speaker, today is observed as Girls in Information Communication Technologies. And in the same way that we're encouraging girls to embrace science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, a similar trend is emerging with respect to girls and ICTs. I'm hoping that through the innovation centers, Madam Speaker, and already through the good office of the Director General of the OECS, and I hope he does not mind me revealing this, it's not a secret necessarily, Caribbean, a young lady who works with NASA, who will be partnering with us in the OECS to inculcate a new generation of girls as scientists, teaching them, letting them know that they too can aspire and become. Madam Speaker, I have already thanked my member for Miku North for the Lapwet Road, St. Mary Road, the Miku Village Extension Phase 1 Road, and Mayat Gardens. I will not mention the others given the remaining time, but I'm sure he's very aware. The member for Castries North, he is willing to finance the roads in Miku North because they have long suffered, especially Lapwet. You will notice under Head 44, and I'll end here, Madam Speaker. Under Head 44, Madam Speaker, you will notice that there used to be an allocation for consultation on child and gender-based budget reform. And I've already been asked, why is this not being financed this year? And the answer is a two-part answer. One, we have discovered in the last 3 or 4 weeks that a sum of $147,000 grant funding has been made available, or was made available actually, speaks to implementation problems, to the Department of Gender Relations for mainstreaming gender issues throughout government agencies. So whereas this was a specific undertaking, we have broadened the concern throughout the agencies, and that money will be used for that. Because gender mainstreaming, Madam Speaker, undergirds all that we do, consistent with the ministry's vision, but also addressing gender disparity, gender-based concerns, be it inequities or inequalities, and the corrective policies that we are to implement so as to speak to those social ills or social concerns. There was a time in a previous life when I lamented the closure of the forensic lab. I want to applaud my colleagues and the minister responsible for seeing to it that that lab has been reopened, because, Madam Speaker, it is important that justice be done and justice be seen to be done, and that is an important variable in ensuring that for women, girls, families, anyone who's been a victim of crime, that the evidence can be processed and that their case be tried and that justice be seen to be served. The allocation for solid waste under head 55, Madam Speaker, you will see an increase there. I want to applaud the Minister for Finance for seeing this request through and honoring this request. I hasten to add that there is going to be a paradigm shift in the collection of garbage because we have to be mindful, one, of our climate action agenda, two, the health and safety of our sanitary engineers or workers, and that it cannot be business as usual. And member for Castries South, I give you every assurance that the problems to which you alluded to in your community with respect to garbage will be attended to. It is part and parcel of our broader concern, not only in your community, but it is part and parcel of our national concern. Thanks for highlighting it. Perhaps I have given it a new primacy of place by you highlighting it in the House.
Honourable Member, you have 5 more minutes within which to complete your presentation.
That is so very kind of you, Madam Speaker. No, I think I'm fine, thank you. We have another debate. Madam Speaker, being in opposition can be a difficult life. It imposes upon you the necessity to be creative, to be humble, but also it teaches you the level of commitment the citizens have to this country. It also teaches you the extent to which, when we collaborate in the good cultural spirit of Kudme, we can do a lot. I ask that we consider what is inherent in our cultural ethic, that spirit of Kudme, that instead of the competition, instead of the polarization, that we come into this budget process with a spirit willing to lend our assistance as good citizens when called upon to do so. Elections are called once every 5 years. There is no need for us, Madam Speaker, to succumb to buckle to the pressures that acrimonious politics can sometimes bring to bear on our best intentions. I ask, therefore, Madam Speaker, as we continue to deliver on the mandate that this government has been given, that we have the cooperation of all agencies, all government departments, wherever you find yourself in this country. We are citizens of this country. It is here we were all born. It is here we are all from. Come next election cycle, you have every opportunity to make a decision one way or the other. But as we as a government endeavor to implement this work program, I pray that we have the cooperation of every good citizen in this country. I thank the people of Miko North. I thank the people of this country, and I wish every success to the students as they begin a new term. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Miko South, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, the Public Service.
Madam Speaker, I beg that the House be suspended until 2 o'clock.
Honourable Members, the question is that the House do stand suspended until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I now put the question. As many are as of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many are as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This House stands suspended until 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And there you have it, the morning session of day 2 of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2017-2018 debate. The House has been suspended until 2 p.m. today. We've had contributions for the Member of Parliament from Sufre, Honorable Herod Stanislas, and he spoke within his purview of the Ministry of Housing, Fiscal Development and Transport. We had an interesting contribution from him. Also regarding the issuing of licenses, thereafter we heard from the member for Castries South, Honorable Ernest Tiller. And we just concluded a presentation by Honorable Dr. Gail Rigobert, who is the Minister for Education, Gender Relations, Sustainable Development and Information Technology. And we do have a number of presentations. We will be continuing this afternoon at 2 p.m. So please do join our broadcast. I am Alicia Ali, inviting you to stay tuned.